Time now for Focus. Today we have a report on civilians caught in the crossfire of the battle between US-backed government forces and Islamic State militants in western Mosul. The West is more densely populated than the liberated East, and according to Human Rights Watch, the battle for western Mosul has been dirtier and deadlier to civilians than the one for the East, which ended in January. Mosul is the Islamic State group's last urban stronghold in Iraq. Government forces now surrounding the old city. From Mosul, France 24's Gallagher Fenwick reports.
In the ruthless battle for Mosul, civilians are paying a heavy toll.
The whole city has been blown to pieces. There is death everywhere.
Thousands are running away from the violence, which rarely spares the city's residents. Those who stay are caught in the crossfire between jihadists and Iraqi troops. The latter rely on US-led coalition strikes to move forward. So far, there is no public information on collateral damage, but there are clear signs that the aerial campaign has a devastating effect at times.
So many have died. They've died from the bombs, from the operations. Plenty have died.
Many locals are reluctant to go on camera about the innocent lives lost when homes are targeted. They say they want to avoid getting into trouble with those who are fighting against the Islamic State organization. Without pointing fingers at anyone, one witness simply agrees to describe what happened here.
3 people were killed. They were inside the house on the first floor. Those who were in the basement survived, but the other ones upstairs died.
Anger is simmering. Neighbors quickly congregate and start to openly criticize the air raids.
Their innocent bodies are buried in the garden there. May Allah be generous with them.
This man leads us to fresh graves.
This is their temporary place of burial.
Yet again, even the more outspoken dare only to offer hints of accusations.
There's a lot of damage. True or not, the victims are gone and so is their home.
So what do you think should have been done?
It's up to the government to answer that question. We, the civilians, don't know. It's not up to us. The government's the one that's at war.
According to Iraqi estimates, hundreds of thousands of civilians are still living in Mosul. The city's critical infrastructure has been devastated. Food and resources are scarce. Many of these people are aware that their presence on the battlefield makes military operations all the more complicated. Troops have to navigate around them. Telling the difference between innocent bystanders and enemies can be a tricky process. However, some have no choice but to remain. This man, for instance, is simply too old and too sick to travel.
No one. No one should ever have to go through this.
Relations with the city's new rulers are mostly peaceful so far. Locals have become entirely dependent on the truckloads of aid that are dispensed by the soldiers. For now, the Islamic State organization is no longer welcome here. Members of this crowd discreetly call on the soldiers after they identify a man whom they accuse of being a jihadist. He is brought in for interrogation, but we are told not to film him and resort to using a hidden camera. His cell phone is searched for compromising evidence. In the end, he is taken to an undisclosed location. One commanding officer tells us that he will soon stand trial in a proper court.
We found text messages from different individuals who are using ISIS language to communicate. Going through his phone is just a means to investigate him, but we mainly rely on information given to us by people.
Rooting the fundamentalists out of Mosul has turned into a long and painstaking process that leaves behind a trail of destruction. There is also a troubling sense of revenge when bodies are left out in the open air for all to see.
That's Abu Aus, the dog. See him there? He used to do real estate for them.
As operations zero in on the final objectives and units make their way through narrow alleys, the confrontation is becoming increasingly dangerous for anyone in the line of fire. The human cost of this battle, rebuilding the city and relations inside of it. These issues have not yet surfaced, but they undoubtedly will have to be dealt with once the battle for Mosul is over.
For more on this, I'm now joined on the line by Jean-Vincent Brisé, a defence expert working for the Institute of International and Strategic Relations. Hello, thank you very much indeed for your time. Now, if you could tell us more to start with about just how much trickier this battle for Western Mosul is than the one for the East in terms of avoiding civilian deaths.
Well, that's always a problem. I'm very surprised by the difference of treatment by the medias and by the international relations about in what happened in Aleppo and what's happening now in Mosul. The difference is the good guys and the bad guys are not in the same side. So now we are on the side of the good guys. And we have a very western side, and we have very defined enemies. But the problem also is that there are lots more civilians trapped inside Mosul, and those civilians are paying a lot heavier toll than what happened in Aleppo. And we have not been speaking about that for months.
Just
now
to clarify, I'm sorry to interrupt, but when you say the good guys and the bad guys, are you saying that basically, in Aleppo, you had Russia supporting the Syrian regime, and there, too, a lot of civilians were killed. And in this case, it's the US backing Iraqi forces, and so they're the so-called good guys. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, that's what I mean, of course. But not only the US backing the Iraqis, it's much more complicated what's happening now in Mosul, because there are not only the Iraqi forces backed by the Western forces, the coalition forces, not only the Iraqi, the US, but also the French and some others. And there are also the Kurds in the north of Mosul, and they are what's most difficult to control, the militias on the western side of Mosul, trapping ISIS forces inside Mosul and preventing them from escaping to Raqqa or Syria.
So these different forces involved, what does it mean then? Let's say they do manage to liberate Western Mosul from the Islamic State group. What do you think it'll be like after that? Who's going to be in charge, and will people in Mosul accept the authority of Baghdad?
And there is also another problem, is that Mosul traditionally has not been very pleased to have a Baghdad authority. They are mostly Sunnis, and Baghdad is not that keen on Sunnis. And the forces fighting against the ISIS inside Mosul are mostly Shiite forces. So there will be some backdrops when the liberation will be ended.
Now, we've had a team on the ground in the last few weeks in Mosul, and there have been a few instances of them telling us that what the Iraqi military is claiming in terms of progress isn't actually what they're seeing on the ground. What do you make of this situation? Because now we understand that Iraqi forces are surrounding the old city, but are they not actually making as much progress as they've claimed?
Well, I think the Iraqi forces are trying to do their best, but they are not that good training, and mostly the situation is very difficult because the city of Western Mosul is very difficult to control. So they are trying to progress as much as they can, but they also want to avoid losses, because they could get lots of losses if they fight inside the town where the ISIS forces are trapped now.
All right, thank you very much indeed for your time and your analysis. We'll have to leave it there. Jean-Vincent Brisé.